Welcome back, students, and today we will be tackling Unit 1, which is the timeline of the South African school curriculum from outcomes-based education to the national curriculum statement of that covers the grade R all the way up to grade 12. We will be looking at teacher training and how that has developed. Then we will go on to the different curriculums that we've had in South Africa. So that's OBE, the NCS, and then of course CAPS. Okay. I've also attached some questions and we will have a discussion in our live lesson together. All right, so starting off with teacher education, I start off in this way so that when we move into the curriculum, you can kind of get an idea of what teacher education and how that influenced the development of the curriculum. Okay, so this unit is about the timeline of the education in South Africa. In the year 2000, the Education Department issued an official document called Norms and Standards for Educators. So this basically was a development of a document that was aimed to look at the academic qualifications for educators. And then that document was obviously revised and replaced with the minimum requirement for teacher education qualifications. So you can see that the education for teachers has also changed as the years went on. Okay, the teacher's role changed and moved from teacher-centered to learner-centered. So yeah, as we know, the traditional way of teaching is kind of standing up in front of the class, almost giving a lecture. Whereas now the learner takes charge and they become independent and responsible for their own learning. So it doesn't fully fall on the teacher's responsibility. The learner is brought in with that too. Right, so teachers and language. So it is also important that as teachers, and especially as a language teacher, that we should communicate effectively. So that means we should be able to use the language effectively that we are teaching. We need to also have highly developed literacy, numeracy, and IT skills. Obviously now post-COVID, we've moved more towards a online model, and obviously children have also developed and have been drawn towards technology. So as a teacher, it's important that you also bring that into the classroom. Okay, it's also important that you become or you are a multilingual speaker. So you speak more than one language. This is important because, of course, we live in South Africa and you will come across learners who speak a variety of languages. So it's important as a teacher, you also ensure that you speak different kinds of languages. Then also be aware of the language being used in the classroom. Of course, as teachers, we need to be professional, and the way we carry ourselves also shows in the language we use within the classroom. Okay, then we also need to have the understanding of the language rules and concepts, as I spoke about that in our live lesson. It's important that we familiarize ourselves with that. Okay, then lastly, to also be respectful and be inclusive of all languages and encourage children to communicate effectively in the classroom with whatever language they prefer. Right, so of course, post 1994, with our government moving to a democratic society, they were looking for a model that would be, you know, equal for each learner to get equal opportunities, which means equal education. Okay, so outcomes based was developed in 1997, not shortly after Nelson Mandela was released, where learners had to meet a certain criteria and had to achieve the outcomes or objectives in order to proceed. Okay, so for example, if the objective was to draw a circle, that child, once he has drawn a circle, he can then move on to the next outcome. Okay, if the child cannot draw the circle, he will be held back, he would be supported, and then in a way to either get him to draw a circle or tutor and give him extra support to get him to that point. So it would be hard for teachers because of course each child has different learning abilities, each child is at a different level of learning. So it did not succeed as teachers obviously had very limited resources, and also teachers were overloaded with administrative work because they had to keep record of each learner's progress, and it did become quite tiresome. And teachers are obviously not trained for this new curriculum. So from the OBE, the outcomes based, they moved on to a curriculum called Curriculum 2005, where here the teacher kind of took a step back, and it was where education was transformed from facilitation and learning to discovery and group work. So this was very learner-centered, it was project-based, there was continuous assessment from start to finish. Teachers again found this curriculum problematic, and it was then revised, and the revised national curriculum was developed. That national curriculum, the revised one was again revised and looked at, and this is when the national curriculum statement was born in 2011. So the CAPS document hasn't been around for forever. It's actually still quite new. So that came about in 2011, and you can see from the OBE all the way to CAPS, there's been a big transformation in our education system. And although it does still need a little bit of work, the CAPS document is known to be quite useful and quite successful. Okay, so the National Curriculum Statement consists of three documents. So the first one is the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statement, so that is the CAPS document. It also looks at the National Protocol for Assessment, so that's an assessment policy. And then it also looks at the national policy pertaining to the program and promotion requirements. So yeah, if you have a child that's fairly behind and needs to be held back in a grade, then this policy will guide the teacher on what to look for and what to record and what requirements the child needs. Okay, so you don't need to worry about the assessment and the promotion requirements. All we focus on in this module is the CAPS document. Feel free to look up the assessment and the promotion requirements documents for your own usage. Okay, so what is CAPS? So CAPS, obviously, as we spoke about, is the Curriculum Assessment Policy Statement and is the curriculum that we use throughout South Africa. Okay, even in private schools, they use CAPS as a base, and they obviously add on the extra education from that, but every school is using this document from grade R all the way to grade 12 and in a multiple of subjects, not just in languages. Okay, so I'll take you through a brief run through the CAPS document so you can get a little bit of a feel of what the CAPS document is. You're welcome to even use your CAPS document now as we go through this video. So starting off in the beginning, you'll see that there's a useful contents page, and this helps you to navigate through the document with ease. It is advisable to put in some bookmarks so that when you are planning your lessons, it makes it easier to find the pages that you use most. So for example, if you are teaching grade 6, you can bookmark all those grade 6 pages so that you can easily navigate through one side to the next. Right, so the foundation phase versus the intermediate phase. So obviously, as we go from grade to grade, we build onto that knowledge. So here we see in grade 1 that learners learn in their home language, which is sometimes the language of teaching and learning. Although there is a debate that some parents prefer their children to learn English from grade 1, a lot of schools encourage that learners learn in their home language from grade 1 to grade 3. Okay, if we look at grade 4 to 6, the language of learning and teaching is not their home language. So children are now encouraged to learn in English, which can be quite challenging for some. So that's something to take note of, especially if you are a grade 4 or 5 teacher, to support the children whose home language is not that of teaching and learning. Okay, and then in grade 1 to 3, learners learn their home language for 7 hours per week. And here, grade 4 to 6, the allocated time for home language is 6 hours. Okay, so that obviously decreases as they get more subjects and less time to engage with the English language. Okay, then on page 6, if you look in the document, we'll see the time allocations for grades 4 to 6. And this is important for when you are planning and when you are managing your time in the classroom. So you know how much time needs to be dedicated to reading, to listening, and so forth. Page 8 takes us through the different language levels, which is important to know as a teacher. So you will see they speak about the home language level and the first additional language level. So it's also important to understand the different levels, whether you're teaching home language or English as home language, and whether you're teaching English as first additional language. It's good to know where your learners are. Okay, language teaching approaches, which you can find on page 12. So you will see for home language, they have a text-based approach and a communicative approach. So the text-based is important to encourage learners to become competent and confident with the variety of different texts. So you as a teacher need to show them what these are. And the last one is to encourage children and give them the opportunity to practice the target language. So, for example, conversations in class, speaking to a friend, speeches, you can get them to role play, you can get them to do a dialogue. There's a variety of ways you can encourage, that conversation in the classroom. All right, and as with any language, there's different skills and different time allocations. So for the intermediate phase, it's the same for grade 4 all the way up to grade 6. So it's listening and speaking for 2 hours a week in a cycle, reading and viewing 5 hours, writing and presenting 4 hours, and language structures and conventions 1 hour. Okay, language structures and conventions. So you'll find it on page 20. These you yourself as a teacher need to learn these structures and conventions, as we need to make sure that we are aware of these in order to teach them well. So if I as a teacher do not know what the parts of speech are, I won't be able to teach it well. So it's important to familiarize yourselves with these language structures and conventions. Right, so the types of text on page 25, you'll see that there's a variety of text that learners will be exposed to in the classroom. So it's also important as a teacher to start collecting different kinds of texts for your own teacher file. So for example, some poems, stories, magazines, newspapers, and some letters. Okay, page 25 shows us the different types of text taught in grade 4 to 6 and provides a useful summary of the different texts. We will also engage with this section when we get to reading and writing in our study guide. Okay, on page 32 to 33, there you'll get a breakdown of the lengths of text, because obviously in grade 4 it might be slightly shorter than the texts in grade 6. All right, teaching plans. So as we know, there's two types of teaching. So it's the two types of planning. So it's the long-term planning and the short-term planning. So the long-term planning is the year planner, where it includes the themes for the year and an overview of what else will be taught in these themes. And then we have the short-term plan, which is a 2-week cycle, which is a step by step of each lesson. It's important as a teacher to prepare 2 weeks in advance so that if you do fall sick or have an emergency, your children are not at a disadvantage. Simply a sub-teacher can fill in your spot and follow your lesson plans that you have prepared. Right, so in our discussion, we will speak about the CAPS document. So you need to prepare these questions for our discussion, which is, so the first one is your expectation. So what was your expectation of the CAPS document? Do you have a copy of the CAPS for English home language? So make sure you download it before we have our lesson. Then check under time allocation. I think it's also on the slide. Do you think that there's sufficient time allocated to language structures and uses? And if you think yes, why? And if you think no, also give me a reason why. Then you've got to reflect on the role of CAPS and answer the following questions. How can we use your knowledge about what learners have learned in home language in the foundation phase when teaching English in the intermediate phase? Okay. What are the main language teaching approaches that CAPS recommends? And then what kind of learning and teaching support materials will you need to teach home language in the intermediate phase? All right, and that's all from me. What we will do is we will have our lesson. I've put all the details on the module site and you can access them on the My Modules for when we will meet and the time. Just make sure that you prepare the questions. Thank you very much.